episode of the Dialectic Space podcast. And today, I welcome my brother, Natta Mass, on this platform. And tonight we sit with a writer whose work has shaped some of the sharpest political reflections in our public sphere through his blog, Mankajang, and his book, Usurped, Stealing a Country. He has argued that the Gambia's present cannot be understood without confronting the deeper historical fractures that have shaped us, from colonial domination to post independence authoritarianism, from the politics of exclusion to the rise of tribal narratives in our contemporary political discourse. He writes with urgency, with conviction, and with a clear belief that ideas matter, that history matters, and that Gambian political imagination must mature if we are to build a nation worthy of its people. Tonight, we explore his intellectual journey, his political commitments, his critique of the state, and his reflections on the future of the Gambia as we approach another defining elections. Natamas, it's been a long time coming. How are you doing, man?
Good, good. Thank you very much for having me, and thanks for expanding the conversation. Hopefully, there's no more mic issues, guys. Apologies for that. That's why we came on late. But I don't you can hear me clearly.
Yes, I'll just bring the phone slightly closer. I'm struggling to hear you. Just
Oh, okay.
slightly. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
And again, like Nata said, we apologize for starting late. We're experiencing some technical difficulties underneath, but I'm glad we're able to overcome that and we can go ahead with the conversation without any problems at all. But yes, like I was saying, Nata and I had planned to have this conversation earlier, I think before Ramadan and then during Ramadan, but we could not hold it for one reason or the other. So I'm excited that it has finally come to fruition, and I can't wait to get to it.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, you're good.
Georgia, so I let it down.
You're good. You're
So I
good. You're
think I
good. You're
have
good.
some hyperhidrosis or whatever. That's what about.
Yeah.
All right,
But
cool.
those of you in the
So,
comments,
what's that?
in yeah, I was just gonna say, if you're in the comment section, if you're struggling to hear Nata, please leave us a comment. Maybe it's just me. He's not so audible to me. But
I
if you're
sound far
struggling to
away still.
slightly far away,
Oh, all right. Let's see. How about now? Let me.
good. Yes, better. Certainly
That's
better.
better. Okay.
Yeah,
I don't want my
good.
camera to have like in its face so close.
Yeah, I think Gambians miss you though. I would like to begin from there. It's been a while since they've seen you on camera.
Right. uh, I try to be regular, but it's not always possible. Life here, things are not that easy. But I'm glad I can make time today.
Yeah.
Ramadan is over. All those little extra stuff that we do. So finally here, and I'm glad. But yep, going back to um, your introduction. I don't know if you want to start that over again, or you need me to just pick it up from where you left off.
No, I think we can definitely dive into the conversation, and I'd like to begin with the first question I have set out.
Okay.
Obviously, you're very prominent in the Gambian intellectual spaces. You are wonderful writer, even a wonderful human being, according to a lot of people that are close to you. So I think I would like us to begin from there before we enter into the political terrain. I want to begin with knowing the person. Who is Natamas intellectually? What shaped your worldview, your sense of history, and your political consciousness from the Gambia to where you are today?
Yeah. So I'm your average Gambian. Hello, everybody. My name is Natta Mass. Since I'm on this platform for the first time, I'll introduce myself. I wanted to ask you, for more or going to make this week. I said week bang. I don't know because I saw you over here a couple of days ago. Now you're happening. So,
It's a week old. No worries.
well, I'm also from SL, born and raised. But like most Gambians, after primary school, in order to access middle school and beyond, had to leave home and go to the campus. So middle school, high school, all of it, I spent it in Ibo town. And right after completing high school, I was lucky enough to get a job in the tourism industry. So as always home, but I was based in Combo primarily for education and for work before travel set in. First to England, and then went back home to Gambia. And then 2010, I left there to go to school in Nebraska in the US for my bachelor's in business administration. And I've been resident here since 2010, moved around a bit, and finally in Atlanta now. But in a nutshell, that's my story, similar to everybody else in the Gambia, just your average, everyday street guy that you hang out with. And as it regards my worldview, again, there's not much difference there. We're all shaped by a lot of different factors, but primarily how we are raised as people, which is mostly influenced by the faith that our parents practice as Muslims, and then our cultural values based on the societies that we grew up in. So anything that clearly contradicts that, usually I'll reject. So I look at the world through those lenses, but then also through my own personal experiences. I like reading too, so that exposes me to a lot of different other ideas, and then I assess them against my own ideas to formulate my own views on certain other issues. But mostly, my cultural values raised in SO in a traditional family, and also Islamic values, they shape my worldview. That's what I will give the credit to.
Yeah.
Like I
So,
said,
sorry.
sorry.
Go ahead. No, you're good. Go ahead.
Now, I was going to say, like I said, I worked as a tour guide right out of high school. So, those guys you see sitting in front of those tourist buses with a microphone, that was me. So, a lot of information goes out to those tourists. They want to know about the country. When they come, they can simply just sit on the beach, enjoy the sun and, the sea. But they choose to venture outside to go see the country, meet the people, learn about the culture. So that's what exposed me to a lot of um, issues when it comes to the Gambia, like historically, how people live, cultural values and beliefs. I grew up on knowing a lot of that, but the questions they ask also trigger my curiosity. So I get to do my own research, ask a lot of questions because I'm a very curious person. So
Yeah.
our rich history, that's how I got into that, understanding it from the perspective of everyday people.
Yeah. So, Nata, Gambian social media ecosystem is so broad, but it's also so small in a way, such that everybody knows, the brilliant ones, the popular ones, and the ones that most people go to Gambian social media platforms to kind of look forward to what they're writing or what they're saying on a variety of subjects. And over time, uh, because of your writings and your public commentary, you've become a person of interest for a lot of people just because of your ability to analyze issues in a way that many consider as serious and also to uh, some extent writing and also nuances with which that. And you went on to write a book from the articles and the blogs that you write titled Usurped, Stealing a Book. You argued that the Gambia's political evolution is a story of repeated domination, first colonial, then post colonial. And I want us to spend a little bit of time for you to talk to us about the central thesis of that book.
So in general, it's kind of like a personal journal. We are witness to history. Imagine 60 years from now, people will be looking back to this period in Gambian history and trying to figure out what actually happened. So primarily, it's like a personal journal. We make commentaries and react to issues as they come. We have our opinions about them. We argue with Mr. X or Mrs. X on our differences of opinion on whatever issue shapes the day. So over time, that builds up. But the central thesis of it is we are products of history. We did not just get here by chance. Every human story has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end. So a series of events led us to this exact point in time in our history. And with every decision, whether you made it or it was made on your behalf, there are consequences that come with it, whether they're good or bad. And there's a reason we keep going back to still now, even though we are, I don't know, decades away from the Jawara regime, we still go back, or the PPP government, we still go back to mentioning Jawara. There's a reason for that. History matters. It doesn't matter how much we try to move forward, we're always going to go back to where our history was. Like Jaliba said, but Mali said, if you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going. So we are tied to history. It doesn't matter what we do, we are tied to history. So part of this is because we are witnesses to history, we need to give our account of what we witnessed. And then the debates that ensue will give people a fuller picture of what actually takes place. But essentially, the fact that our history shaped us into who we are today, it is ideal, in my opinion, for us to go back, reflect upon that history, see where we made mistakes, because there's a human endeavor. Everything human, there's likely going to be mistakes because we are not perfect. So how do we get things better? Is learning from those mistakes, understanding them in their proper context, and then making adjustments as we go along. And I noticed that also since we have a lot of young people coming and getting active in Gambian politics, not just young people, but a lot of people who chose to go out of self-preservation, were forced out of the Gambia's political space, they completely disconnected. And now having found their voice, they need to understand things in their full context. I'm not claiming that my book is a complete, um, exhaustive,
Representation of the history. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
of all those events, but it
Mhm.
helps shape perspective like, hey, this thing happened because this was happening at this time. If you consider this, that is why this happened, or this thing happened within this context. So if you understand it fully, it might help you shape your decisions now. And we can also see the trajectory where the country is going based on that. So the central thesis basically is we're products of history and we need to know that history before we can make good decisions about the future.
Why do you think though that that is the case in the sense of, like, I'll just take example of myself, like, there's just a lot of young people of my age who are so disconnected with our social and political history, in the sense there's not that keen interest. You just look at what is happening today, like you so brilliantly put it, without proper diagnosis of what happened in the past historically to understand where we are today. And I'm just curious, from your experience and from your writings, why do you think that disconnect exists, such that at a historical level, people are not interested to inquire, people are not interested to learn, but it's just easy and convenient for people to just sit and just look at circumstances and just call that as the representation of the reality, when there are nuances that led to what is happening.
I think a lot of factors go into it. Primarily, I would say access. Like when you want to write about the Gambia history, you will be hard put to come across like an exhaustive narrative. If not for Jawara's book, there's a lot of things we would not know about the Gambia in the past, because what do we document? A lot of it we still, to a certain extent, rely on oral history. I'm not saying that's wrong, but it has its weaknesses. Let's say, for example, when you have a Jali singing praises on your behalf, you are a good person. How many people sung songs for Yaya Jam when everything else he was doing in the country, out of fear, people don't speak about it. So if we rely on that one narrative because we hear a song about a person, that person is good. We're not going to hear about anything else until you open another door. Say, for example, somebody came, let's say Bakre Rice wrote his book about the Gambia, then you get to see a different picture of what it was. So because there's not that much record, I don't know if I should blame it on the school curriculum or the people who design it, or we can't really blame anybody for it, but there's a short supply of historical material when it comes to that. And the presentation too, maybe that just people find it boring or that they don't think is relevant. But yeah, truly there is a huge disconnect between what used to obtain in the past and what we are witnessing now. Also, we are a trusting society. The people we like, the people we trust, the people we look up to, we hear their narratives and we stick with it. It doesn't matter what facts come later on. We are not willing to let go of that. We just want to listen to the people we want to listen to. Disagreeing with somebody, even if they are your teacher, doesn't mean that you disrespect them. It just means that every human is limited in their capacity. So if they are
Yeah.
telling you this is the history or this is the story of what happened, and then you came across evidence that actually makes sense, there's nothing wrong. Maybe they were limited, they didn't have access to that information. You can embrace that. So a lot of bias also goes into it. You know, who do I respect, who do I like, and I'm going to stick with their narrative. Sometimes I think also politics can be nasty, so people just choose to stay out of it, but it actually
Yeah.
affects you in every way.
Also, to that point, I also do not think sort of we're any sort of epistemological sort of history, right? Like you said, even though they come with their shortcomings in terms of credibility and the chain of narrations, among other things. But I think that also sort of plays a role because our lack of appreciation for people who sort of are responsible for that part of narrating our history and recording it. And for a very long time, it's not that, like you said, we had so many people who are interested in archiving or documenting our history. And our historians, I had Hasum Sise here, and we had a brilliant conversation about this, and he was just telling me, just said all of these information are actually available, but people are not so interested to learn about it. And there is also not, like I said, not an appreciation of individuals who are in that area, like Najalolu. They are not appreciated so much. We don't look at them as though these are institutions of knowledge that understand so much of who we are, and we just look at them as praising us all the malam with run. That's it. But I think that's an important point. But you also describe Gambian people as repeatedly usurped, or the Gambian state. What does this mean in the context of state formation and political agency?
So let's say, take Barrow, for example. Like Jammeh before him, those guys were broke before they become presidents. Their villages were like any other village in the Gambia.
Mhm.
So now assess their position now, where they are and where they were before they become presidents, before they assume state power. The same goes for a lot of people in, the employ of the public service. We all complain about the corruption. So in the literal sense, we can go with Jammeh's claim of Dekabi Mahomo. He said that, like, the country
Yeah.
belongs to me, even
Mhm.
though it's a trust. People entrusted him to look after our affairs and manage our resources so that it benefits everybody. But, if you want ego, Dekabi Mahomo. And to the point of saying, if I say you're not going to pray today, eat, you're not going to pray, you know, stuff like that. So that's one aspect of it, but that's in the literal sense. Um, if we're going to say in the literal sense that they assume the presidency or gain the trust of the public and then take all the power for themselves, that will not be accurate because Jawara didn't do that. He was a Democrat. Adam Barrow is on the same trajectory. The way he talks, you can see it in it that all this is because of me. You owe me gratitude. You should be grateful to me. That kind of situation we find ourselves in. So he has embraced those words and deeds. The colonial government literally operated that way. Like they own that land, that is their territory. They don't care for the people or what they think. They just do what they want to do. So that's the same thing. But again, if we go with the literal sense, it will not be applicable for the history of the Gambia. I know many people misunderstood it, but for the term to be applicable, we have to look at it from another angle, and that angle is, let's say, a modern word would be like a state capture, for example.
Mhm.
So you have cronyism, you have corruption, all of that.
Mhm.
And in essence, what I'm trying to say is it is a case of stealing someone's identity as a means of accessing wealth. So the privileges that come with the presidency, or that you can sign documents and they say this is from the government of the Gambia that the people voted for, then we can give them loans from the IMF, from the World Bank, or go to sympathetic countries and beg them for resources, and they give it to the people of the Gambia. But instead of it benefiting the people, we get kickbacks, we get um, half of it or three-quarters of it diverted to personal accounts, private individual accounts. So these people are essentially taking the identity of the country, the resources of the people, and the needs of the people, and shopping it for their own benefit and leaving the people destitute. And that has been the case throughout. It is applicable to all three governments at different levels, obviously. But essentially, that's what I was trying to drive at. They come to the presidency with claims of helping to better the lives of the people, end up accessing resources that they would otherwise never have had access to and use it to benefit themselves, their immediate family, and the people in their circle. And then the rest of us who are going to end up paying that debt because the Gambia still has a lot of debt. Who's going to pay for it? The Gambian people. And how did we incur that debt when we never used it? Because people stole it in our name and used it for themselves. So essentially, that's what it is, using state power or capturing the state for personal benefit and leaving the people on the wayside.
What would you say to people that make the case or make the argument that, look, these leaders who usurp our state, bastardize our resources, are in some ways a reflection or even representation of the people on several fronts, right? And my position has always been that I think our political class have betrayed Gambian people for a very, very long time, just because of how they've been so far removed from the day-to-day life of Gambian people, and the fact that they've refused to provide even the basic necessities for the people of the Gambia. And so when people make certain cases like that to say that, look, our leaders who have failed Gambian people are a reflection of our Gambian society, what would be your response to some of those assertions like that? That, look, it doesn't matter. It's the system itself that is broken. It's not the leaders who are there who have failed, but it's the society itself that is complicit in such failures.
Um, there's some truth to it, but not entirely, because that was not always the case. I keep going back to the PPP government. That was when we had any serious government. They had their flaws, but nobody quote me as saying that was a perfect government. It was not. When you compare it to the three administrations we have, PPP was by far better than all the other two, which is Jame and Barrow.
They're gonna
So to a
quote you on
certain
that, Nada.
extent,
They're gonna quote you on that, brother.
yeah, they can quote me on that because I'm a product of that. Like, I was a teenager when Jawara was overthrown. When we go to school, we had breakfast at school, we had lunch at school. We used to get supplied school uniforms. At Independence, we even get free shoes, sandals. You know, when your notebook was full, you go to the library, they give you a new notebook. When school summer holidays is coming, there's excess of food in the school storage unit. They call the elders in the village and distribute it among them. People didn't know all that economic hardship. You know, when you have children going to school and they're going to have breakfast at school, they're going to have lunch at school, you're not going to worry about feeding them when they come home because they're already full. You only worry about providing them dinner. You know, the teachers were committed to what they were. So from personal experience, I know the children are not getting that level of care when they go to school anymore. But parents are concerned about the level of education that they are getting. So it's the same people in the first administration. What made them so patriotic? What made them so committed to saying that the country was better? And now that is not the case. So yes, to a certain extent, the people are to blame, but the leaders also have a responsibility that they need to be aware of. And how much they get away with depends on how we accept. How much we accept from them. What you accept, you might not deserve it, but if you allow it to happen to you, then you invite it upon yourself. So there's some truth to it. It's a two-way street. The leaders, they have agency. They need to know what best serves the people, and they need to go for that. But then also the people, like you can see it in the debates that we have online. Hey, this is wrong. This shouldn't happen, because it's somebody they care about who is doing it. They'll say, "Oh, if you guys were there, you would do the same thing," basically excusing it. So I would not say to those people like, "You are wrong." There's a certain truth to it,
Yeah.
but like I said, the leaders are responsible. The people are responsible. If we accept it, it will happen. If we don't accept it, it will stop. So it takes all of us, which is why we cannot quit. We have to keep pushing until we get it back.
Now, what do you hope your book would teach us about the emotional cost of building a nation state? Bearing in mind, the grief, the trauma, and also unfinished healing. Bearing in mind what Gambia has endured for the last 30 or some years.
In essence, for people to see that the struggle of making your nation function properly for everybody never ends. Some people will put down the torch and you pick it up and move on. So just like nation building, yeah, say, "Oh, I started projects, you cannot finish it. The next person has to finish it." So it is perpetual. Every administration will face its own problems, and they have to tackle that and build it and make it better. The same thing with citizens. We have to remain eternally vigilant and see that um, governments are always flawed. When people assume power, even the ones that you like, the ones that you support, they're not going to get everything right. So it's up to us to be sincere, to be honest, to look at them and assess them based on their own performance rather than making assumptions. So, in essence, it is a perpetual struggle. We have to remain vigilant, and we have to continue our advocacy. Our determination to live dignified lives always comes at a cost. And that is because power never yields. It always takes and takes and takes until there's nothing else to take.
Yeah.
It seeks to demoralize you, and it will succeed in so many instances, but you have to stay grounded, understand how power gradually builds itself up, preempt it, and stop it in its tracks, which is why it is crucial to stop Adam Barrow now. The longer one stays in power, the more rights we lose. And because that is how power feeds, which is on our rights. It is why history is indispensable. You look at the track record of Jammeh, how he got to where he was in 2016, with so many dead, so many maimed, so many disappeared, so many exiled. How did he get to that? It didn't happen overnight. There was a series of events. Each time he consolidated power. And when we're seeing that trajectory taking place again, it is on us to allow our people, hey, this is why we need to continue to fight. When Barrow came, we were all supportive of him. But at some point, you start seeing that he is deviating and he is making new friends and he's enriching himself. It's not wrong to have hope in people. Let's take an example for Senegal. Like Pasteur, when it came, everybody was like, yeah, all of Africa was celebrating young leaders, National Assembly young, Prime Minister young, President young. But it's politics. Fallouts will happen. But when that happens, it's not wrong for you to change your mind, change your perspective, and say, yes, this is wrong. I was in this for the people, and now it's not happening for the people. I need to stand by the people because the people will be the ones who will remain. So how Tembe got so powerful from a whole, I don't know, was he a lieutenant or yeah, Lieutenant Jame in the
Lieutenant,
army?
yeah.
His colleagues considered him a clown. Like wherever he is, he makes people laugh, and everybody liked him. Boy Kanila, they used to call him because he made people laugh. He got from that to Dekabi Makomom and then killing people. How many people disappeared on the jam? So if we cannot crack that code, you know, um, which clues lie in history? Like how do people change from being such
Yeah.
a when Battle Force came, what did people say? Oh, look at his face. He's such a humble person. He's a decent person. Now look at him talk. Like,
Yeah.
how does that happen? So, if anything, we need to understand that the struggle will always continue. People assume power and it reveals who they are at their core. So, if you
Yeah.
say, oh, I support him and you just want to go with him, then there's no point in fighting at all. Just let people be in power and do whatever they want.
Yeah. I mean, that's so important, Nata. While you're talking, I'm just thinking about Alaji Barrow's book, The Dictator in Us, where he so um, talked about just how society ourselves are complicit in terms of what Jammeh became. I mean, what became Jammeh or what became of him. And also in your article, Why History Matter, in the Gambia's political movement, you talked about unresolved historical fractures. And we can also tie that to the current state of governance in the country and just how bad things are. But the system that we have, again, to my earlier point, is just so bad, such that I don't think, regardless of how we as a collective try to stop it, I think even if leadership changes, if that system continues to be there, we're going to continue to have the same problem. It's going to be a cycle of the same thing over and over and over again. And so for me, I'm slightly conflicted. I don't even know what we need to do because human beings make systems. Systems don't make themselves. But what sort of human beings should we build to build a system that is befitting of our way of life, that is befitting of moving Gambians out of poverty that for the most part they've been for us, as we know in our history. And so I'm just curious to ask you if you could really talk to us about some of these important fractures that still persist. And what is the way to go? How do we build the ideal Gambian such that the ideal Gambian can build the ideal system that works for us? And then it's not going to be the same cycle that we have where Adam Barrow leaves, we have another politician come, it's going to be the same. It's just, it doesn't get better.
So there, I'll just quote Fourier and then expand on their long-time tagline: "Know yourselves, know your country, know the world, and then be the masters of your own destiny." I don't know if that's exactly what it is, but it's stick with me. That's how I understand it. So know yourself. What do you value? You know, what makes you tick? What does your conscience tell you is right? What is your conviction? Once you find that conviction, stand by it. It doesn't matter if you are alone. You know, um, majority of us, in fact, I can say the whole country, we are religious people. We are faith-based people. The story of Noah is in the Quran. I mean, in the Bible, the story of Noah is in the Quran. How long did he preach to his people? How many people turned to him? Even if you are alone, but because that's your conviction, stand by it. If you believe something is right, stand by that until you find something else that convinces you that, in fact, this is not right, there's something better, and then you can adjust accordingly. But don't go with the flow just because people are saying, oh, I'm on this side and this is my friend, and you go with them. Just like Malcolm X, who is the one person I look up to the most, is I am for justice, no matter who it is for or against. I am for truth, no matter who says it. So once you find out who you are, what you believe in, what your values are, then stand by that conviction. This is my truth. Something, will come along to try to nudge you off that. If it is more convincing, because you don't have a 100% or 360-degree view of everything in life, there's only a certain element that you know. Somebody else has something better that will come along. If that convinces you, then go with that. But it always starts with your conviction. If you are looking at personalities, I don't like this person, I like this other person, and then you move with people, you are never grounded. Once we do that, and I wish people will just reflect on that, know yourself, know your country. What is the culture that you grew up in? What do they value? Does your values align with the culture that you are raised in? Is there anything you need to adjust? Once you know that, look at the world. How do they operate? What is good in the world? What can we learn from other, parts of the world? I know I go back to, faith and all that, but there's a teaching in the Quran that we made you into different nations and tribes so that you may learn from each other.
Each
We
other.
all have different experiences in life, but you cannot find your place in life if you don't actually know who you are at your core. What do you value? What is your truth? What do you stand for? Like Malcolm said, back to him again, if you stand for nothing, you will fall for anything. And then you're constantly like, wherever the wind blows, you go. You have no, be a tree, have a deep roots and stand firm on what you believe is the truth until you find out that what you believe was not in fact true. Be open-minded and then adjust accordingly. So that way, when we are faced with issues, we will look at the issue, the merits of it, and the disadvantages of it, and then we can decide what side we're going to fall on it. That will make the fight so much easier. For example, all of us, we agree in the Gambia, there's nobody you will find except people who are latched onto Barrow, which exactly the point that I'm making. Just because Barrow is there today, you change your position like, oh, term limits doesn't matter anymore. But besides those people, everybody agrees term limits should be imposed in the Gambia. That way, power will know that the people have a say in what I do. I want to build a legacy. I want my children to be comfortable in this country. I only have a limited time, so I need to make the most of it. The reason we are constantly taught to remember, death is because your time is limited. Make the most of it. So if we have time limits, and that's your conviction, this guy has done 10 years there. It doesn't matter what you think now. There is what, over 20 candidates who are contesting. Find somebody who aligns with what you think the country's direction should be and give that person a chance. That alone should be enough. But don't say, oh, if Barrow is not there, somebody else is going to be there. Whatever you're saying about that somebody else is going to be speculation. So find your conviction, find your center, stand by it, and then adjust as you get more information. That is how we're going to build a country. If we go after personalities, my feelings, my ego, it's never going to work because, that's just human nature.
Yeah. Now, you read a lot about ethnicity too, and for the most part, their historical relevance in today's society in terms of some of the discourses that we have. And while you're also having the dialogue, I was also thinking about just how faith plays a role in our politics and just our way of lives. We're predominantly people of faith. We're almost majority. I think we're majority Muslim country. We also have Christians in the country as well, and I was also curious whether, as much as those things are important, the reverse could also be true, that they also contribute in some way in terms of just how we abdicate, or we create an excuse for leaders instead of holding them accountable. You know, you look at Gambia, for example, some of the things that happen, you know, the structures of authority in terms of faith. You know, I think it's going to be hard, if not impossible, to take them off that conversation in terms of holding less accountable, because of this perception that, oh, alaleka mansa tombong, you cannot question leadership, you know, mansaya mandia, and all these things that we have, you know. So I also think that even as we have that conversation about how do we build, you know, that ideal person that you so brilliantly articulated, is these structures and systems that we have, I don't think they help so much, and that bothers me a lot. I don't know if it bothers you as much. That I think that's one of the biggest problems I have in terms of how do we navigate that. One, we're following the dictates of our religion and our faith so deeply, and on another hand too, we also want to make sure that a state is operational in such a way that people do the right thing, people do the just thing, people do things that are fair and equitable. And so, is it the case for you as well, that those things also play a negative factor in terms of how we build this person? I mean, this ideal Gambian that we think about.
Not necessarily. It's based on people's interpretation of it. For example, you're
Okay.
Muslim, I'm Muslim, and then ISIS claim they're Muslim too. But
Yeah. True.
we don't believe that they're interpreting the teachings of Islam the correct way. So it's the same thing. Like we are told the story of Umar, the Prophet's companion when he was a leader. He used to go out, disguise himself and ask people about, oh, you're this leader, what is he like? Just to gauge the feeling of the people. That's our role as citizens. Government draws up policies and implements them. They need to know how they impact people. That process is politics. So the leaders coming to us, religious leaders and cultural leaders, and saying, and stuff like
Mhm.
that. Um, it needs us to correct our leaders, to tell them when they are doing something right
Yeah.
or when they're doing something wrong. They're sitting in state house in their comfort. They don't know how their decisions impact our lives. Their experts will come to them and tell them, oh, GDP per capita, blah, 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 is this. And they say, oh, great. But they don't know that somebody is sitting at home. Because of their policies, that person lost their land without compensation. That person lost their farm without compensation. They don't know any of that. So that whole process is where politics comes in. It tells the government, hey, and the people who engage in it usually know something about statecraft, they know something about governance, they know something about policies and how to implement them, public service and all that. So they will look at it and say, hey, this policy, if you implement it here, is the downside. That is modern day politics. It's not like politics of, old days where a king dies and then their descendants inherit the kingdom. Those people don't really care much because they are all powerful. They have the military, they have everything. But in a democracy, that is not the case. So essentially, our religious leaders need to, tread with caution. It is understandable that, where they're coming from, we understand. Because when you want to dislodge a sitting government, it usually leads to bloodshed, and that's what they're trying to avoid. Let's be patient because that's what Islam teaches and stuff like that. So we don't disrupt the peace that we have in the country because generally that's how things used to obtain. Like Yajame said, I put down my life to be the president. If you want to do the same, if you want to be president, you lay down your life. If that happens, there'll be a lot of destitution, there'll be a lot of debts, a lot of misery. So from
Yeah.
that perspective, my understanding is, yield to the leader as long as they're doing right. If they're not doing right, there used to be mechanisms in place. Let's say, for example, the most relevant institution as far as how things used to be before the colonizers came to Africa is the alcaloship, even that the president is dipping his hand into. The alcalo is no longer there. Their children or the eldest child becomes the alcalo. But they don't just make decisions because they live in a village and every village has a cabilo. Every cabilo has a head, you know, and that head is the head of the different families that fall within that cabilo. And every cabilo has different compounds. All those compounds are their family heads. So if I'm the eldest in my family, I have three brothers beneath me, and they all have their individual families all together. They defer to me out of respect. So I become the Kabilo head. When the Alcalo wants something, they'll say, go and call Natta, he's the Kabilo head of, Maskunda. And then I'll be part of that decision-making process. This is what we want to do. And those who grow up in the village know this. Then they will say, oh, the youths are also here, the representatives, let us ask them what they want to say. The women are here, let us ask them. And then the leaders of the, so it's imbalanced. They will talk and say, this is what is going to take place. This is what we think. So there's always a council. Even as far back in the 13th century, the Program Fuga, that is it. Like, we understand this is our society. How do we want to progress? Then they agree. The authority figure is the alcalo or the chief or whatever, but there's always consultation in the background that these colonizers didn't see. So those mechanisms are in place. But if we say we shouldn't be, challenging the authorities, what mechanisms are in place that tells them this is what we should do when everybody else's position depends on whether he's happy with you or not? You cannot fire a Kabilo head. Where are you going to fire him to? Like, he's a Kabilo head.
Yeah.
His people respect him and they're going to defer to him. So if you have a clash with him, you already lost a section of the village, and that's not going to be peaceful. Yeah. So it's the same thing in government. Yeah. All ministers, they defer to the president. He appoints them. They serve at his pleasure. So they're always going to tell him what he wants to hear, as we are witnessing. So who is going to take the place of those advisors who will tell the president, hey, this is wrong, do it this other way? It's the people in opposition. So if you say that is bad now, what are you trying to set up? Failed state constantly in the country. And I don't think that's, I don't agree that that's what Islam wants us to do. Okay. So it's not the problem as far as religion, whether Islam or Christianity, it is how people interpret it.
Yeah. Now, identity politics is another subject that I want us to touch on a little bit before we proceed. And it has reared its head in our politics for a while, and it has always been around. I think we can all agree that as Gambians, we've always lived as a collective. We marry, we eat in each other's house, we serve everything together, and our identities in terms of tribe do not do so much in terms of how we lived as a community. Everybody you see, you either speak Mandinka, you speak Fula, some people speak multiple languages. It goes beyond just two, right? And for the most part, at the state level, in terms of how we try to capture a state in terms of power, politicians for a while have always used various ways and means to amass power. In fact, they use ethnic grievances to mobilize political support for themselves. And so I would like us to begin from what do you think is the genesis of this before we even get to what continues to happen today. Why do you think there is so much of identity politics at our national level today, as it has been yesterday as well, and it doesn't seem like it's going to dissipate anytime soon?
Yep. It's always, they set it from the leadership sets the tone. So when we delve into the history of it, like you said, the Gambia, even still now, outside of politics, we're the same. You can hear somebody whose name is Jallo and the only language they speak is Mandinka, like the Wolof says, Santa Debutan. So it's kind of crazy how suddenly we see each other at these loggerheads. But that also has a genesis. Like I said, before the colonialists came, we had an identity as a people. You have Jollof empires in Salum for the cereals, you have Fuladu, you have Manding and all that. We identify ourselves based on our shared cultures. Europeans sat down and drew a map, draw lines on the African map and said, this part belongs to you, this part belongs to this other person, and they created identities around that. Eventually, that got exploited. So there's a regional divide that kind of morphed, in our case in the Gambia, morphed into the ethnic divide that fuels the tribalism in the Gambia. Yeah, so what do I mean by that? As we saw in the colonial phase, when the colonizers came, basically the entire country was cast out. Like I said earlier, it's like they don't care about the people. All they were after is the resources. So policy-making process, the people were not part of it. Those who were in the protectorate, even those who were in the colony, because the Gambia was divided into the protectorate and the colony, which was Bathurst and Thomas and Mary's division. They used to call it KSMD. So the colonial administration was nothing but an exploitative enterprise. In fact, that was the reason why they explored that part of the world. The administration of the territory, of the Gambian territory, for the longest time was actually not governed by the British Crown. They outsourced it to trading companies. So the people were just, resources that they can exploit, which leads to the slave trade. So with that in mind, they treated the resources, how they can exploit it to their economic advantage. And those in the colony were, of course, also exploited, but in a different way than those who were further away from the seat of power. So opportunities existed for the people in the colony that didn't exist for those who were out in the country, being the farmers. So because of that ethnic composition between the colony, which was mostly Wolof and Aku, everybody will tell you even now the Aku are reserved in such a way like they are not active in politics and in social circles and stuff like that. They keep to themselves to a certain extent. But we share a lot in common culturally with the Wolof, with the Fuller. So that we can say Banjul or Batos at the time was predominantly a Wolof society, and then the provinces predominantly were Mandinka societies. So the opportunities that, or the lack thereof, soon took on political or tribal dimension. So when you see this divide, which was deliberate by the colonial administration, like I said, let me see, I think I wrote down the date here somewhere in my notes. I had to come with notes for this.
Now you get.
So the first, until 1888, the first legislative council came into being in 1888 in the Gambia. Before that, the Gambia was administered as, I don't know what the name of it was, but Sierra Leone was the base for the British Crown, and the Gambia was administered from Sierra Leone. So they basically gave charters to trading companies like the West African Trading Company or whatever for them to administer the region that the British had interest in. That was until 1888. So when they first had the Legislative Council, of course, it was all Europeans. But in 1947, there was a new constitution in the Gambia, and that provided for the appointment of some of the local natives into the Executive Council or the executive body for the country. So this history is kind of like just laying the foundation for that. And the understanding is if you bring somebody from the UK to come and man a position in the Gambia, you're obviously going to pay more than you would pay a native Gambian. So in their own economic interest, they had to train some Gambians to be able to man those positions. Eventually, as we move further away from the 1940s, there was more changes. A legislative council was introduced in the Gambia. So now people can elect their representatives to go sit on that legislative council. But the voting was limited only to yard owners, like compound owners. If you own a compound, then you're considered responsible. If you understand the American electoral college system here, that's what it is. They want to limit people who can vote. So yard owners and responsible adults were the only people who can vote, and you had to live in the colony. The protectorate was basically the protectorate, like it was British interest, but they were not considered as citizens. So that was the rule back then. And then eventually it led to the formation of political parties, the first of which was the Democratic Party of J.C. Pye. And then 1952, I think that was when PSGI formed UP, and then Gambian also formed the Muslim Congress. Even there you can see, because like I said, Banjul was predominantly Aku, which are mainly Christian, and then some of the Wolof and Syrian who live there as well. Predominantly Wolof, basically, that's what they speak. Some of them became Christian. JC Pye, Jane Qualify was a Christian, PSGI was a Christian. When Jahupa formed his party, he named it the Muslim Congress. You can see, maybe intentionally or not, like he was appealing to the Muslim base in Banjul. He's not more Wolof than PSGI, who actually, according to narratives, believe that, in fact, I think it's true that he hailed from the royal family in Salem. So he's not more Wolof than him, but what they have a difference in is that he's Muslim, he's Christian. So naming your political party Gambian Muslim Congress has an appeal to it when it comes to the political activity. But all in the 1950s, those parties were concentrated in the colony area. They had no presence in the protectorate. So since voting was limited to the colony, Bathos and the KFMD, these parties, their activities were limited to the colony. They couldn't venture. They had no presence basically in the rest of the country. So those regions in the hinterland were left out of the Gambia's political process. They did not need structures there. Nobody's going to blame them for that because that's how the system was set up. only the colony can vote. The protectorate is not considered as citizens. So they operated within the system that they had. But as events move forward, that is going to change, as we will see with the emergence of PPP on the political scene. But before that happened, to show you that if people have no representation, usually things go against them. That is how Edward Francis Paul came on the political scene. In Jawara's book, he did say, I think it was around 1917, when he was sent as a missionary to Balanga, which was a major trading post back then. People would bring their groundnuts and sell it around that time. I mean, in that region, that was where he was posted because he has access to a lot of communities back then. So while he was there, he became a de facto leader for the people, just to show you that people didn't care about tribalism. They don't care about what language you speak. The people were united. A typical example of that is Jawara. He went to school because of Payoma, who was from Banjul, doesn't say any ethnicity with Jawara's family, but he saw the potential in Jawara and said, I'll bring him over so he can go to school. We all remember Mankajang Samusa going after Demba Sabali because why he went after Esa Pal, calling him names and stuff, and he said, Esa Pal's father, Master Pal, we all know him, what he did in this country, blah, blah. So he helped a lot of people. That was the story throughout the Gambia. So it's never about, oh, we feel like we're better than you, you are less than us. No, even within ethnic groups, people have those differences. But what was happening in Balanga back then, because there was no representation, the colonial government decided to change their weight and measure system. You know how people say, oh, I somehow do I felt 10 dollars or I felt $10. That was the weight of measurements. Whatever load the donkey can carry, that's how they weigh things. And the colonial government changed that using weights, actual weights. So the farmers felt like they were being cheated out of this. That was the time Edward Francis Small kind of organized them, hey, let's form an organization that is going to help you. And he called it the Cooperative Marketing Association, or Gambian Farmers Cooperative Marketing Association. Help them advocate. And they were happy to have somebody educated on their side. So they all rallied around him. He was their de facto leader. That was basically a trade union to help them, navigate the complexities of that weight and measure system. But he also saw that it is not fair that the colonial government is imposing tariffs on these people, change of policies that affect their life without consulting them. So you probably constantly hear the no taxation without representation.
Representation.
Right. Like in every capitalist system, those European traders and companies and firms that were exploiting our farmers to get their groundnuts, they were not happy with that. They called Francis Small an agitator. So they compelled the colonial government and the Wesleyan Mission to remove him from Balanga because he was agitating the people. They saw the danger in the people mobilizing and coming together. So they kicked him out from there. He was not a traditional politician, but he contributed in that way. But that also, people remember things. So they brought him back. That was the reality of the time. And then these political parties were not advocating for the people. Like I said, it's by design for the colonial administrators, not for their own personal interest. But the people started agitating and advocating for their own representation. And that led eventually, just to cut a long story short, the PPP coming on the scene and organizing themselves into a political party. Like Jawara put it in his book, there was a lot of divisions. Mostly they were welfare associations like we have here in the US. We have so many associations that help each other out. Like if somebody passes away here, we come together, put money together and say, let's send them back to their family so they can pay their last respects because we're so far away. Those things happen even though it's internally in the Gambia. So when Jawara saw that potential, because the political parties were exploiting those internal migrants who couldn't stay on the farm because the farm was not giving them enough. They had to move to the colony because there was opportunities at the dock where they can be laborers. That problem had an ethnic dimension to it as well. So before we get to the formation of the political parties, imagine you are on the farm and you're spending the whole entire rainy season producing crops. And then when you sell it, you cannot even feed your family before the next rainy season. So the young people got this illusion, just like we have the backway syndrome now. They decided that this is not for us. We're going to go to the, $10 and then go find a work as laborers. Banjul, by, nature's own design, is not suitable for farming. they also rely on those docks and the sea for their survival. So suddenly you have all these people coming from the Nyomis, the Badibus, the Kiangs, Elara, Bolonkono, all coming to Banjul to find work. So obviously they will see their economic, opportunities dwindle. Now we have to share with all these people. What that leads to is hostilities. But because of the ethnic composition of one region, which is Banjul, being predominantly Wolof, and the protectorate being predominantly Mandinka, these hostilities will take on an ethnic dimension. You will hear in narratives like Banjul Suwa, Banjul Suwa. That is a distinction between those people who live in the colony and the Suruas who came from the provinces, which we
Protection.
call Santa Surua. So they will take those ethnic dimensions. So when you talk about those unresolved differences, is our people are very proud. It's not just Mandinkas or all of Gambians are very proud people. If they feel like their dignity is being insulted, they carry that with them very deeply and they relate those stories. But now we have the benefit of hindsight. We can look back and say this was not an ethnic thing. They were not saying, oh, we are better than you shouldn't be here. No, it was a challenge to their economic base. So the treatment that they meted out to the provincial natives, that was real. That was nobody can argue that. You can say that it was not based on ethnicity, and that would be correct because it was economic in nature. But their experiences were real. They already even mentioned it in his book. You walk the streets and they tell you something go say, taunting them, humiliating them. So that was their experience. So when this whole process was taking place, the politicians, because responsible adults can vote, they were using these associations. One of them was led by Pasanjali Bojang. Another was led by, I think, somebody called Ebrima Sonko, who had the Pankanta Kafo and Kamben Kafo. They united together. Pasanjali had the Pambonyomi, Lelawa, Suri Kafo. So the politicians were exploiting them, but their people were not being represented effectively. So Jawara and the few people who were educated were being co-opted into these organizations to help them with their, paperwork, being liaison between them and their employers and the colonial administration. So he saw an opportunity there to create unity between these different associations, even though there was rivalry. That's what led to the formation of PPP. So now put all that together. UP of PSGI, Democratic Congress of JC Pai, Muslim Congress of Gambia. They were political parties, but they were only concentrated in Banjul and Compass and Mary. Here comes PPP, a registered political party, which was representing the interests of the protectorate people. And their first fight was to make sure people have representation and, voting rights. Once that was granted, that means these parties were completely swallowed up. Because imagine putting Nyomi, Badibu, Kiang, Jara, all of URR, West Coast region all together and say these people can vote and they are going to vote and your base is only in Banjul and Compass and Marys, which is Cape Point, Banjul. Obviously, you're going to lose because you have no presence. The people don't even know your name. Other than the stakeholders who were aligned with PSGI, nobody knows who these people were. So PPP came and then suddenly it was like they lose all their political power. Bitterness grew out of that. So it became a case of, these, Santa Mandingola and stuff like that. Ethnic dimension came into our politics from that point on. And we're still struggling to get ourselves out of that. Every president tries to exploit it, with the exception of Jawara, who was not concerned about any of that. If you look at his government, his composition of his government, and his politics, you will not see any trace of that there. In fact, people were saying, like he betrayed his people and then aligned with the people in battles who were taunting them. So it's a long history. But if we don't understand that, we are going to go with the narrative that people are saying, oh, it's the Mandinkas think they own this country, blah, blah, blah. And it's crazy. I like the fact that I think it's Nyang Jai. He was posting recently about Banjul Demba and stuff. And he mentioned things that, PSGI is from a royal family lineage. When the PPP first came, some people were saying, Jawara is a parabo, he cannot be a leader of a political party. PSGI was from a royal family. He didn't feel like he should be a subject of somebody who is of a lower class than him. So all those things played into him, which led to him making some unfortunate comments that were captured in Barclay Rice's book of what he thinks about that political party and stuff. So these tensions are there. We trying to brush it under the carpet does not get rid of it. It just, makes it stay longer, and then the people who are feeling it, and they're going to interpret it a different way. Let's bring it out, have a conversation about it, and address it once and for all.
And that's what I was going to ask you about is, To the extent of why it is today in our political society, it's almost scary because of just the dangers that it poses. And I'm just curious to ask you, why do you think we haven't confronted these things from the first republics to Jambe put it on steroid, and now with the current president, I think he's a little more subtle about it, but it's also very conspicuous. You don't have to be super intelligent to understand how the government of well, not the government, how President Adam Barrow and his political persons around him, how they're using it to their advantage, right? And it's also, you look at the political space. If you're a certain tribe, you're mostly associated with a particular tribe. I have friends who, just because of my last name, because I'm Mandinka, naturally they just think I am UDP. I'm sure you go through that too, and a host of other people who are, well, of they are naturally associated with PDIS, or they're associated with what's it called, other political parties that have Wolofs as their leaders. The same could be said for people who are Jolas associated with APRC as well. And the case goes on and on and on. But why do you think we've not confronted it as a collective, not just the political class? Even when we want to hold conversations about tribe, it's hard because everybody's looking at you like, okay, like with some level of suspicion, as though this is a taboo that we're not supposed to have a conversation about, right?
Right. Yeah. That's what makes it worse. Like if you don't
Yeah,
talk about it, it's not going to go away. It's just going to
yeah,
be there. Everybody feeling the way they're feeling about it. You
yeah,
know, that is what leads to this whole problem of, I don't like to say his name, the deputy speaker at the National Assembly, all this problem. That's what it leads to. You say, oh, my name is Ebrima Sonko. Oh, why are you the big? Because of your last name.
yeah,
So anybody in the civil service who says Nko, you are UDP. Because
yeah,
Jame created that label, UDP is a Maninka party, and we buy into it as if we cannot think for ourselves.
yeah,
All of this is a political ploy, completely and utterly a political ploy. In 1994, when Jammeh came to power, he banned all political parties in that country. No political activity. I think it was decree number 89 or whatever. Nobody was allowed to do any political activity because he said politicians destroy this country. Politics is, he named it something like dirty or whatever. Like he has all these expletives about politics. So decree 89 banned politics and political activities. He said the next 2 years, in fact, they said 4 years, we're going to concentrate on building the country. Nobody should be engaged in politics. But people said, no, 4 years is too long through the NCCE, National Consultative Committee. They reduced it to 2 years. So within those 2 years, he was trying to consolidate political power, knowing that at the end of it, he would contest because he had no intention of going back to, what's it called, to the barracks like they
yeah,
promised. So within those 2 years, by the end of it, he decided that that decree number 89 would be what he would put in place. If you are a minister in the PPP government, you cannot run for political office. If you are a political party, if you are president, you cannot run. If you are vice president, you cannot run. Sirif Deba, Hassan Musa Kamara both served as vice presidents and ministers in the PPP government. That means GPP was banned, NCP was banned. Jawara was obviously the head of the PPP. PPP was banned because, um, thanks to our political system back then, where we had a parliamentary system, you can be a member of parliament and then be a minister as well. Those parties were banned. So now, who do we have to contest elections? He banned everybody just to create an opportunity for himself because he knew if politics opened up, the old politicians came back, he was going to lose.
yeah,
People were not that stupid. So he decided to ban all of them. That's how the UDP was born. He didn't see that coming. So the next election was 2001. He decided, okay, UDP, everybody in that Adiyam sector, we can all see, she tells it in our biography. She was one of the PPP campaigns. Hassan Musa Kamara was very active in formation of the UDP.
mhm,
It was formed basically PPP, NCP, GPP. These were the parties that came together and formed the UDP. So 2001, he thought, if I lift the ban on these parties, NCP people will go back to Sirif Diba because he's still here. PPP will find a way to mobilize their people and try to come back. And GPP will go back to Hassan Musa Kamara because he's still here. He did that in 2001. Sirif Diba, I think he had like one vote in some regions because people were like, just come and join UDP, let's move forward. So his plan didn't work. He knew that was not going to happen. So now what does he have left? Nothing. By 2006, he started pulling out the tribal card, all because he wants to stay in power. And then we buy into it. Oh, the first government here was a Mandinka government. They've been here 30 years. They did nothing. When even he admits it at other meetings, just like Barrow does. He will say one thing here and then say the complete opposite the next time. Mandinkas hate themselves. That's what Jammeh used to say. Jawara was here 30 years. The only people opposing him were Mandinkas. So where is the tribalism you're talking about? Yeah. Because Serif Diba was a Mandinka, Dr. Bolondimboya was a Mandinka, so many of them, they all had their parties. PDIS was headed by Sidia Jara, all political parties. So if it was tribalism, why are they not all in one camp? But people are seeing that and saying, oh, because these people dominate the politics, they feel like they own this country, so we need to go against them. That is just kind of talking to some deep-seated animosity that you have between yourself, but you know for a fact that it's not the truth.
And fear-mongering too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when Jawara came in, he realized that the people that carried me to power, mostly provincial people, because of colonial policy, they had no access to education. I did make a video about that. The last governor of the Gambia, before he left, he told Jawara, don't be in a hurry to Gambianize the civil service, because a lot of the people that you want to employ, they don't have any experience in this, and your country needs resource staff. So don't be in a hurry. Take your time. Otherwise, like they say, you rush, you miss. So he sat and reflected on that. And that was true. But in addition to that, a lot of people who supported him from the protectorate, there was very limited number of people. And all of them found their way to the government. Sirif Dibas, Sirif Caesars, they were all included in the government. But when it comes to the technical part of things, the Akus and the Wolofs in Banyu, who were, had access to education earlier on, had some experience being clerks and, operatives in the government, they were in a position to help the new government stand on its feet. So he gave positions to them. So a lot of people who thought, just like 2016, after Jammeh was defeated, what were they asking Barrow? Oh, are you going to hire any of Jammeh's people? He said, no, I have enough technocrats. Because then Gambians were feeling like APRC should not be a part of our new government. This struggle was against them. They were supporting Jammeh. Now we defeated Jammeh. We need to kick them all out. Why were we feeling that way? It's exactly the same thing that they were doing when the colonial administration was kicked out at independence. The elites back then were like, kick out all the British officers and give the positions to Gambians. Why? Because this is our independence. We did it in 2016, 2017. So these things are always there. When Jawara took over, he decided, you know what, democracy, we need to put our country on a good footing. I'm going to give positions to people who are able to man those positions. But obviously, the people who supported him, they got angry. He betrayed us. He left us on the same people who were taunting us, calling us Santonko, he's give them positions. So those people also saw the political power of the PPP, and some of them, because of economic interest or to secure their positions, they thought, if I don't fence myself in when these people finally get the education they need, I'm going to get pushed out. So cronyism was started in the country. But when you look at it all, it's about political survival. That's what the Gambian people need to understand. The dangerous thing is that when they tie it against ethnicity, I might be the most educated. Who I am proud of. I'm not going to denounce that for anybody. When push comes to shove, before there was a country called Gambia, there were Mandinkas. Before there was a country called Gambia, there were Wolofs. Just like Chimamanda says, Nigeria is an artificial creation. I was people before Nigeria. Yeah. Majiki, Alagi says the same thing. We are immersed in this colonial space. They created a space and said, this is Gambia. But look at us on Senegal. What is our difference? Nothing. Language, food, culture, dress, everything is the same. So we were there before they gave us that Gambian identity. So why now are you allowing politicians to tell you, oh, this particular tribe is bad and this particular tribe is good? It's all for them to stay in power so that they can steal from your resources. And the sooner we learn that, the better it is for us. When your neighbor has a funeral, you are there being sad for them. You have friends, you have relatives, we're all intermarried. Like I said earlier, you will see somebody named Jallo, they cannot speak any other language than Mandinka. And Jallo is traditionally a full name. Or you see people whose name is, Sonko, and they cannot speak a lick of Mandinka. That's why we're settled. Language is just a means of communication. What you practice, what you believe, your value systems, that is shaped by your culture. And deep inside all of us, we have that pride and we want to hold on to it. So being proud of who you are doesn't mean that you do not like the other person. You just, like Yusuf said, Linga don't so company. Not Yusuf, that's what the want to say. So it's up to us to be smart. Let's be smart about this and know that these people are seeking political survival as opposed to addressing issues. We are not each other's enemies. But when it comes down to it, the more we push, it's going to end up like we had in Rwanda because people are proud of who they are. It doesn't matter how educated they get, they never detach from their roots. That's just a fact. Even with Jammeh, with all his craziness, people who could afford to live anywhere in the world were still building compounds in the Gambia because that's their roots. That's what they are connected to. America is 1,000 times more advanced than Gambia. Everything is more accessible. But even though you're here, you got citizenship and everything, you still want to build in the Gambia. Why do you want to go back to that poor country? Because that's who you are internally. You cannot detach yourself from that. So stop mentioning people's tribes. It doesn't matter how educated they are. It doesn't matter how exposed they are. Everybody has that deep-seated, pride in them, and they will defend it when it comes down to it. We don't want to get to that point.
Yeah. And certainly it has worked for most politicians too, or political entities, either by design or default, in terms of amassing political support in the country, including and to the extent of winning elections as well. And so I bring that up specifically to transition you to the formation of UDP, United Democratic Party, as a party that you openly support, and I believe you're a member of the party as well. And whether the party has been um, somewhat a victim of mischaracterization in that sense, in terms of how, for a long time, people have associated with UDP as this Mandinka party, to the point that you were mentioning earlier on, because politically it's convenient for others to do that. But I think there is also a history to it why that is the case, from Jawara era to the formation of UDP to where we are now. And obviously that also works in advantage, because naturally, if I'm I mean, identity politics naturally, and we know we can talk about this whole day even here. There's reason why black people for the most part identify with the Democratic Party, and why they align more with the Democratic Party in terms of their policies, in terms of what they do. And also there's reason why Caucasians or white Americans identify with the Republican Party, right? And there's a whole list of history to that. And so the point I'm making is also the fact that you know I think most Mandinkas identify with UDP has also sort of worked in the benefit of at least the Mandinka candidates that UDP has in terms of winning, because naturally you gravitate towards somebody that you identify with, that is a representation of who you are, that is an extension of who you are, and that is not even controversial at all. So we can look at it on both sides, but I'm curious to ask you, why do you think there is so much of that identity, what looks to be somewhat an identity crisis, for most people that try to portray UDP as this predominantly Mandinka party, which is not? Because if you look at the formation of the party and its leadership and its policies, there is no such thing that are able to even educate themselves about that. But from your perspective, why do you think that is the case?
Yeah, you know it. Like when you say a party is tribalist, you have to look at it like you mentioned. What's the composition of that party's leadership? What policies do they promote? Look at UDP's policy and say if they implement this, it will only benefit Mandinkas and nobody else, or it will harm everybody else. What policies are there? You cannot find anything. Look at the leadership of the party. It is the most diverse. They give us people like Femi Peters. Everybody is celebrating them as heroes. People like Single Nyasi. These were all people don't know for the longest time. Mr. Dabo's deputy was Yaya Jalo. Aji Yam has always been there. Aji Suka Inaka. All these people are not Mandinkas. You know, the party has no policies that tell you that if we implement these policies, they will only benefit the Mandinkas. So when you say tribalism, what are you talking about? Because people belong to a certain ethnic group. Try to eliminate that in the Gambia. Like, if you belong to this particular ethnic group, you cannot support this political party. If that is the case, if that is the yardstick, then every single political party is tribalist in nature. Just because the Gambia is predominantly Mandinka, that's what the um, population, distribution is. Most Gambians are from the Mandinka ethnic group. Barrow relies on a lot of those people, even Jammeh. Look at some of his closest allies, the Baba Jokes and all that. They were all Mandinkas. So if UDP was formed, like I said, it was an amalgamation of GPP, NCP, PPP. That means they own the base of the PPP, they own the base of the, what's it called? Some of the bases of the PPP, all of the bases of the NPP, and some of the bases of the GPP. So there was a split there. Like PPP, they used to do very well in Fonyi, like Ali James J's territory and all that. But when Jammeh came, they all switched over to Jammeh. So not all of the PPP's territories, but Serif Deba strongholds, mostly Badibu and Kiang, because Jara, I think, was aligned with the PPP. So if they have their base in that, what is telling you that this is tribalism when Fonyi is completely no opposed, but that is not tribalism? So it doesn't make any sense. We just have to ask those people, what do you mean when you say UDP is a tribalist party? Right? Because I don't get it. General feeling, which is my speculation, is that the status quo, whether it is under Jammeh or Barrow, they benefited from that. And some people, because their relatives are in those positions, they know if the status quo changes, they will use the benefits and privileges that they have. So it benefits them to oppose the UDP and label it as the boogeyman or, this tribalist entity that nobody should be a part of. Maybe because they know they don't have any such access to the person of Hussein Odabo when he becomes the president, they don't have that same access. So their opportunities are going to be limited. But every politician makes and will continue to make bad political decisions, strategic decisions, or whatever else that comes with the territory. But looking at the person, for someone who has been in politics, not in politics, but in the public's eye for since in the late 70s, mid 70s, up to now, and you cannot find any dirt on him. When you tell them, give me an instance of the tribalism, they start talking about 2016. From the 1970s to 2016, that's when you find an example. That is not rational. It's just basically people going with their emotions. You find that generally in the Gambia, like it's interest-based. My ego is what I'm going to go after. For example, they will tell you Khalifa is a good person. Khalifa is, the most patriotic. Khalifa is the most honest. Khalifa is it. And when it comes to elections, they tell you don't vote for him because he will not win. Where is your conviction? That's what I don't get. Like you believe somebody is a good person, but because of your ego, because of your own personal feelings, for whatever reason, you say don't vote for him. That's what it comes down to. My interest lies here. That's where I'm going to go with. And we need to see that whenever we see it, we call it out. And that's how we're going to move forward as a country. Otherwise, we are all doomed because everybody's going to look for their own interest. And we shouldn't be doing that. Everybody's going to make mistakes. Everybody's going to make bad political calculations. We are human beings after all. Even the most noble of us, those make mistakes. And it is our job to rectify them. But if we go with our ego, we go with our feelings, we're never going to go anywhere. But there is no basis in fact that UDP is a tribalist party. They never promoted, they never indicated anywhere. When we're seeing blatantly at every NPP rally what they are doing, what they are saying, and nobody is calling that tribalism. Why is that? Which makes people feel like your fellow citizens start looking at you with suspicion. And that cultivates the same animosity that we saw in the Fourth Republic, when all that taunting was going on and then it was not addressed. People had that deep-seated grudges in their hearts that these people do not like us because of who we are. We are cultivating the same thing. When other people do it, it's okay. But as soon as somebody does it from the side of the UDP, it's like it's anti-Mandinkaness. That's what is going on. And the Mandinkas are feeling that. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it, but that's what they are feeling. And it builds up. That is why I was saying recently you saw Imam Fati and Bakausu on the same trajectory, agreeing on the same thing. That the next step is calling for, Mandinka nationalism. And that is not in anybody's interest because it's only going to get worse from there. So when we see facts, let's go with the facts. When we see something is wrong, let's go against it. You will have people bigoted all the time. There's nothing you can do about it. Even in the 21st century in America, people are still trying to revive the Confederacy. It doesn't matter how much access to information they have. Those are individuals. But when people are in positions of authority and they make such reckless statements, let us confront them. And then we'll put a stop to it. But whatever happens in the political space will always seep into the cultural space. And before long, we'll start being suspicious of each other, being hateful of each other. We would not want to live in the same community with each other. And when, God forbid, problems happen, we're going to go after each other based on whose tribe is what, like it happened in Rwanda. We don't want to get to that. So when people are peddling this nonsense because of political interest, let us stand up and call them out. Don't say, but X, but Y. You will have bigoted people. That's the history of the world. But people in positions of responsibility, leaders of political parties, people in public service, let us not allow them to get away with it.
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you on that. And I think the biggest responsibility is bestowed on the president of the country to be the person to take examples when things like this happen. But I think it's unfortunate that he refuses to take actions and he allows this to fester because it's politically convenient or expedient for him to do so. But I think, to your point, there are several dangers to it. That if such things continue to happen, there's just so much people can identify or people can accept if it continues to happen for a long time. And so I hope that the society is vigilant and that people care so much to make sure that we stand together to condemn and not also accept some of these things happening. But Nata, specifically on the person of Honorable Alhaji Hussein Udabo, somebody that I deeply admire and respect and follow his life very much. And actually, I was fortunate before his appearance at the TRRC to sit down with him to interview him for his testimony before the Truth Commission. And I was nothing short of it was nothing short of impressive in terms of what he did. And I feel as though a lot of people that speak about him don't know him so much. And so there's this mystery around him that most people either deliberately or they just of sheer ignorance, they don't wish to educate themselves about him in terms of who he is as a public official, the role that he played in the community and the sacrifice that he underwent for the country, the legal representations, and also the role that he played in terms of developing a political party as powerful as United Democratic Party. I don't think he's been credited for those things enough. But also, party UDP, I think, is undergoing a defining moment, especially in terms of the December presidential elections. We've seen the divisions that happen. We've seen people who left the party, but that's not also new. UDP has always been a resilient party. Bear in mind what it has experienced, especially during, well, since the Jambe era time. Let me not go beyond because UDP was not here during PPP era. But talk to me about what's happening. Is the party evolving? Is the party stagnant in terms of electability for its leadership? What is happening? What do you observe? Because you're one person that when you write, I think you dive into what do you see happening in a way that most people don't, because most people just look at the problem without addressing why that is the case, right? And you've also talked about this in the past where people are telling, oh, UDP needs to change its leadership, and often you're like, people that are outside that have no contribution whatsoever for the that don't, for the most part, for the whole year or the political period, don't do anything, are the ones that are sitting out to tell us how we should run our party or who should be the flag bearer. I think speaks to the earlier point that I was making in terms of how you see things. But talk to us, what do you see about the party happening and how important is December presidential elections for UDP as a political entity?
It's a major point for us. That's kind of like why all this disruptions going on in the party kind of felt scary at the beginning. But in as much as we want to salvage the Gambia, we need to do it as a united front first and foremost. Uh, Before we had the split, everybody was talking about, oh, there's camps in the UDP, camps in the UDP, camps in the UDP, and then it came to light that that was in fact the truth. I wish that it was handled differently back then rather than downplaying it, but that would not have changed the dynamics at all, in my opinion. Um, so when it comes down to electability, I don't really get what people mean by that, because it's, I don't know. I guess my understanding is not up to that point because you say electability, uh, you say Barrow is more electable or deserving of being
I guess what
elected
they
than
mean,
separate.
I, I guess what they mean is that when UDP has the likes of the Youngs and National Assembly representation, everybody else that the party puts together, UDP gets the majority. And
Mhm.
when it comes to the leadership itself, in terms of the person of Honorable Dabo, uh, he doesn't get elected. I think for the most part, that's what I hear when I hear people say, "Oh, Dabo or the leadership of UDP." Is not electable because he wasn't, and the numbers keep dwindling or they keep going up. But I also say there's context to it, especially in the Jambe era, knowing how Jambe used to do stuff and allegations of election fraud and among other things. But I think that's what mostly people mean when they say, "Oh, Dabo is not electable because people are not voting for him enough to win."
Yeah, that's on people. Like they need to tell us why they are not voting for him. That should be the first grounds why you're not voting for him. Why you think he's not capable of governing? Like I said earlier, I gave Khalifa as an example. I don't like to compare and contrast them like that in that person, but people will tell you he is honorable, he is straightforward, he is patriotic, he is this, he is that. And then when it comes to elections, I don't vote for him because he won't win. So who is going to win? We have all the good people. Like you say, you look at President Dabo, his contribution, his personality, his integrity, everything. You look at that and you say, these are all check, 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 check. When it comes to election, we cannot elect him. Then you have the likes of Barrow and all kinds of phony people. Like when he's not there, he can put his Babakari to be the leader. So, oh yeah, he's electable. So that's why I said, know yourself. We have a conviction of what it is that you believe in, and then seek that in the people that you want to align yourself with, that you have those similarities with. So if you say he's unelectable, like, okay, give us the reasons why you think that is the case. Because if you're going by election losses, just do a simple Google search or ask now, what's it, ChatGPT? Just answer a simple question. This everybody starts quiz this thing. Ask it a simple question. What is the assessment of international observers when it comes to Gambia's elections between 1996 and 2016? Only one election passed the credibility test, and that is 2016, where I was Hussein Ogaboden in India. 1996, 2001, 2006, you vote, the soldiers pick up the ballots, put them in military trucks, take them to the counting centers at the regional counting center, like, so for example, in Gambia, they go to Kerouac. What happens on those trucks? So if you say he's not winnable, then you are giving credit to your IDMS election, integrity. Like
you're legitimizing it, yes.
You're legitimizing it. So that factor is not considered, number one. 1996, a lot of people would, when the facts are actually laid out, people will see it come out clearly. When people tell you, oh, he ran and sought refuge in the Senegalese embassy at pipeline at that time, blah, blah. Because the soldiers knew they were going to lose that election. You know? So when they tell you, oh, he's greedy, he's this, he's that, after 2006, he knew there was a barrier for him that he cannot cross because legally Yajam put in the 1997 constitution that after a certain age you cannot contest. 2011 was going to be that was last election. From 2006, they were trying to find somebody who would lead the UDP. Because when you listen to his interview, you see it is a trust that's told to him. Part of the reason why all this conflict was not good from the beginning, we were telling people Dabo has a dual responsibility. He's the leader of a political party to mobilize the people and fight for the country. But in another sense, this is a trust that was given to him, and he needs to make sure that that trust does not fail. He's not going to leave UDP in ruins when everybody saw it obviously. Or some people want Lamin Sane to replace him, some people want Jans Dawa to replace him, some people want Tanya, some people want Roy. So all these different camps, all these different factions, if you like, within it. How do you sit them together? Like I can ask anybody. If you think if we went to I think when the split happened, I made a post very simple, like I'm an institutionalist. Whoever comes out on top based on the process, that's who I'm going to go with. So let's say we did the institutional process effectively, everybody participated, and let's say Charlie Bimagis as the person who won. There was already sentiment there, he was favored, and it was not going to be fair. So there'll be a practice. Imagine if they did that and Youngs contested and he won. You think the camp that preferred Talib is going to be? So there was a lot of dynamics at play. I'm not saying this is what it is because I didn't talk to Mr. Dabo about it. He's a very private person. I don't even have that, interaction with him to that level. But he first has to secure that trust and make sure that people, it's like, we're not going to fight over, I'm not saying political parties are inheritances, but you want to make a will so that when you are no longer there, your children are not going to kill each other over what you left behind. So you don't want that destruction to take place. But that aside, we have all these things going on within the political party. If you say he's not electable, tell us why you think he's not electable. Is he promoting something that people are not going to buy into? That is on the people. That's why I say, nobody's going to convince me to change my mind about something I decided to be a part of since I was a teenager up to now. And just because people don't support him, that's why I was mad in 2021. I did say that because, creeped into some of the WhatsApp groups and they were saying, oh, if we vote for Halifa, even though he's good, he doesn't have the numbers, so we need to vote for Barrow to stop the UDP. Okay, you had your event now. Let's move on away from that. But just because people are not supporting him, my conviction is he has the education, he has the mental capacity, he has the patriotism, he has sacrifice, and he will continue to sacrifice, and he's determined to see that the Gambia is on a good footing. All those things are still there. None of it changed. Even the people who left, specifically the UMC, they will tell you we don't have any difference in ideology or policy when it comes to the UDP. We just think that it is time for a change for people to move on beyond Hussein Odabo and select somebody else. That is basically the foundation. They don't have any ideological difference or anything. To me, that is significant. I supported him because I remember, I think you asked it earlier also how I joined the UDP. But when the military force came to power, like I said, we're all teenagers running after the military vehicles. We see them in their fatigues and stuff. And that kind of made us fall in love with them. We don't care for anything else.
Yeah.
But I remember the people back then were telling us, "Soja masakuna kalawangu." The Malawi New Jampala, Molbe Palajan, the Polo Kajala, oh, these are PPP supporters, they are bitter because Jawara is gone. Not long before that, November 11 happened. And they were like, okay, maybe they're onto something. And then they start scaring you. Before long, Parafenya military attack, Carton military attack. Sana Sabali is, caught in an attempted coup. And then you start thinking, okay, maybe these people have a point. And whenever that happens, that guy, I remember him vividly, like you start getting scared about all that, like when we have a military government, it's not going to end well. And then you start thinking, okay, they just said 2 years they will go. And he was like,
Mm-hmm.
and then that exactly is what happened. So you start sitting down and reflecting on that. At that young age, I remember in SO when they had a political rally, Wajuara was talking and he was like, I was in jail and then I heard about this decree that they ban all political parties. But I was worried, like, who is going to contest on behalf of the people if they ban all these politicians? And then I heard that Mr. Davo agreed to be the leader of the opposition. I had that in his meeting in SL.
Nice.
So that's when you know that, okay, they have a trust in this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start observing him. For some of us, our families were NCP. I know when I start talking about Jawara, people are like, oh, they were PPP family, they were NCP. So there was this feeling that when the soldiers return to the barracks, Sirif Dibo will come back and then he will have power because Jawara will not be there and people will vote for him, then he become president. There was that feeling there. And then UDP was formed. The first thing we know about that was Sirif Dibo lawyer, Sirif Dibo lawyer, Sirif Dibo lawyer. So we fell in love. But eventually, the more you follow somebody, the closer you observe them and then see how they conduct themselves, as you move on. So you can see that this guy is measured, he has what it takes, he's educated. There's a reason why every politician around this part of the world usually goes to law school. They were lawyers, they were prosecutors or whatever, because you need that understanding of the law, how it impacts policy and stuff like that. So all these things are factors that go into it. So if I decide at that point, initially it was because this was my goal, but as you grow older, you observe things and then experience that, okay, things are going the way they're supposed to go. The things that he's saying are making sense, and he has the personality to match those things. So I'm going to, strengthen my support for him. If none of those things change, why should I change? Just because somebody else doesn't want to.
Yeah.
That's on them. They can make the same assessment and with their own conclusion.
Yeah. With all of his brilliance too, I think also, there's a sense of some political miscalculations, from his end, I think. And also the elephant in the room that I think most of us avoid to talk about is the fact that, look, for most people, there's a misconception that, look, Nana man said if an Usinadawa presidency is a promotion of Mandinkas in the country, which is very far from the truth anyway. But I think there's a sense among certain quarters from where we're from that have that sort of very misconstrued way of looking at him. And for the most part, they try to beat him with a stick that he doesn't deserve. Right. But I think we can gauge a career in politics since 1996 and objectively analyze his contributions in his party and his sacrifices, and also hold him responsible for some of the political choices that he makes, including the fallout with President Barrow, without having to seclude the conversation or isolate the conversation predominantly ethnically or because of tribe. So for most part, when I have conversation with people, that's my point to them is, look, you said this guy is tribalist. What do you even mean? Like, what are you talking about? So let's interrogate that. And often you find that they have nothing to say because there is none besides an ethnic sentiment or tribal sentiment that they feel or they think they know, which is not even true. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about the alternatives. People that have separated from UDP, Unite Movement for Change. In one of your articles, you talk that Unite for Change is unite which is not a political party yet, but it's some people say it's an extension of UDP because members of UDP are the founders of the Unite movement. You categorize them as struggling for, I mean, going through an ideological issue in terms of clarity. There's a lack of ideological clarity when it comes to their movement and their messaging too. What do you mean by that?
Okay, let's see here. So in the article by the UMC, I wouldn't necessarily say there was lack of ideological clarity. The way I framed it was more of strategy, like what was
Okay.
their strategy when it comes to um, stamping their mark on the Gambia's political scene. Because like I said, we mentioned it briefly before we had the split. Um, there were claims, which I think did a huge degree of damage that people are not um, really talking about or looking at it. Just like you said, when people have this fear, before I jump onto that to address that, we shouldn't
Mhm.
dismiss people's fears. Just like some of us are sitting with those deep-seated animosities inside us because of what our parents went through when they tried to go access, labor camps or sources of labor on the colony and the humiliation they faced. We had that narrated to us, and that caused a degree of bitterness. And if people don't acknowledge that, it's not going to lead anywhere. So in the same way, if people feel that UDP is going to come and that it will be misery for everybody else, we shouldn't dismiss that. That's a genuine
Yeah.
fear. We need to bring it out on the open. Let's be honest and talk about it. We already know we all care about each other. We marry each other. We live together in the same communities. We do everything together. So it's not about, that kind of tribalism. Culturally, we are unified. Politically, we are divided. So let's not be afraid to bring out what we feel about each other. I think I made a post years ago, like way back. Like, if you are, give me one stereotype about the Mandinkas that you talk about in your circles that you wouldn't want to come out. Okay, to stoke the honestness, because it's frustrating. What do
Yeah.
you say in your quiet corners that you wouldn't want to come out? Let's talk about it. Let's address each other's concerns about, because we all have it. You know, we talk about each other behind each other's backs, and I think in the Mandinka community they accept that this is wrong. In the Wolof community they accept. Let's talk about that. So we shouldn't dismiss people's fears, but they shouldn't hold onto it and not talk about it, because then it's just irrational fear.
Yeah.
Bring it out in the open. Let's have a discussion and talk about the issues. That is the only way we can move forward. So when it comes to the UMC and the split, the point of that article was to say, what is their strategy? Ideologically, like I would not question their ideology, but strategy-wise, because politics comes with both ideology and strategy, how do you intend to position yourself in a place where you are able to be competitive and win over hearts and minds? So it is clear from their belief that a different candidate has a better chance of winning than Hussein Udab. That's what led to the split. That's their foundation. So I'm not going to question their philosophy on that. They stated that publicly. So essentially, they're adults. They decided that this is the right way to move forward. If we floated him, we're not going to win again. As valid as that may be, going back to the statement that I said caused more damage than people are willing to admit, is framing that in the guise of saying, if UDP selects a Mandinka as their flag bearer, they're not going to win. That is a huge, even though that may not be the intention, that is insulting to a certain extent, and it does more damage than people would be, willing to admit. Like I say, but like the English say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Como
You might say
formato da
that,
Vafona. Mm-hmm.
right. You might say that, who don't you or man get for that? You cannot say that. So if Mandinka cannot, win the presidency, when would be a conducive time for Mandinka to win the presidency? Essentially, it's telling them stay out of politics. You cannot support a candidate or what have you. So that caused a lot of damage that was already there. So in that article, basically, I was saying, what is going to be your strategy? Because this narrative is already there. And then we see people who support the UMC also coming out along similar lines, saying something not exactly like that, but similar to that. Already, before the UMC was formed, when people start saying stuff about the UDP, what do we say? Hey, well, the UDP government, look at what Rohi is doing in Banjo. It's not perfect, but it's helping the people of Banjo. Look at what Danjo is doing in the URR. Look at what Landing Sane is doing in LRR. Look at what
Youngs.
Talib is doing in KMC. We acknowledge that, we celebrate that, we elevate it. Within that conversation, some people will say Talib is not actually a right fit in the UDP. He's not one of you. He's, those conversations where they're trying to separate him from the UDP. So that narrative was there, but people ignored it. It's like, hey, they want to make UDP look bad, so they will look for good elements with the UDP and try to make it look like they are separate from the UDP. That sentiment was already there. So when the split happened, and people started saying, okay, you can have your Mandinka party now. And those people were the ones who were on the side. I'm not saying this is the policy of the UMC, because we've seen Talib, we've seen people in the UDP like Ebrima Sonko and all that, still having high regard for Mr. Dabo,
Honorable Dabo. Mhm.
elements within the UDP. So I'm not going to say that's their position. But that article was, at that moment, I think, in fact, the trigger was somebody made a post. It was a fake profile. I can't remember the name of the profile. But UMC put out a statement saying UDP needs to come out and condemn this. But do you even know who made this position? So that was the trigger for that blog. It's kind of like, hey, we want to figure out
Response.
how we're going to
Yeah.
deal with you guys. Are you going to form your brand around the fact that UDP is divisive? Select us. That's why we moved away from them. Select us to be the president. If that is your take, we are going to fight that battle, because this is a 30-year program that has been building itself on integrity, on the rule of law, advocacy for the rule of law and the rights of the people. If you want to split and form a new political party, that's well and good. It's an adult decision. You don't need to consult me to decide what to do. You make your choice, go test it out in the Gambian people, let them move forward. But if you want to come and take this party because of one of that personal goal, then you're going to hear from us. So before we jump into that, here is what it is looking like right now. So that was more of a like, hey, guys, turn around here, tell us if this is your strategy or not your strategy, so we can know how to move forward cordially. Because from my own perspective is there's different factions, like we said. Some people want, if Mr. Dabo decides he's not going to run again, for Young Dabo to ascend and be the candidate. Some people were mentioning right. Landing Sana was being mentioned, Ahmed Sana was being mentioned, Talib was being mentioned. So all these factions were there. So what do you think? Like, they were going to be rivals within the party, different camps, everyone having their own. So when the split happens, obviously some of them will move on and just decide, okay, forget about it, we're going to support Mr. Dabo and then move on. Some of them will say, no, we're going to go because I think that's the right thing. So now those two people are going to be yapping at each other. And we're seeing that happening. So as long as it stays in that, the people we can talk to, we try to talk to them, but the people who we cannot talk to, or who want to keep the fight going on, you can fight among yourselves, but don't make it a UDP thing, because that's not UDP's policy. We all had Mr. Dabo today saying it. We have one common person that we need to focus our attention on, and that is Adam Barrow. Mama Kande is not our problem. Halifa or PDIs is not our problem. UMC is not our problem. Adam Barrow is the one who is in charge of our economy, in charge of our tax money, in charge of everything. He is the one we are focused on. So that was my whole philosophy. We guys want to go at each other because, one camp felt betrayed, or one camp felt like they were panyered or whatever. We can try to bring peace amicably. But if that fails, you guys want to go at each other, go ahead. But don't say it's a UDP thing, because there's no policy that says this is what UDP's position is. And some people cannot make that difference. So that was what that whole article is about.
Yeah.
What is their strategy rather than what their ideology is.
Yeah. But do you also think it's the case that sometimes it's just hard to make that distinction because, there are certain figures in the party, for example, either party that's not unique to UDP. If they make certain statements or certain commentary, it's hard to separate that from statement of the party itself or the position of the party itself. And so, in relation to the parties, as you anticipate for the party to win in December 2026 elections, how do the party strategically position itself to amass as much success as possible in the sense of getting more people to come into the party to identify with the message of the party? Again, an important point you mentioned, not to dismiss the fears of people, but how do we accommodate these fears to clarify and make, in fact, factual assessment of what the truth is instead of just positions that most of the time come from irrational fears or positions that are not, in fact, truth or realistic. But how do UDP position itself to have more people come into the party, bearing in mind that There's important figures that have left the party, whether we like that or not. That is the truth. People have left the party. The likes of Lyman Jeda, with the likes of the Talibs, the Mentengs. Prominent figures have left the party to join other places. And remember, Barrow is also, and his NPP, they came from the United Democratic Party as well, at least for the most part. So I'm really curious in terms of strategically the party and its messaging, and how does it insulate itself from people who attempt to speak on behalf of the party, that rub people the wrong way in terms of some of the engagements that they do online, either in the form of insults or rhetoric or all these really unacceptable behaviors that sometimes within our greater analysis of our politics, we lose ourselves in those process. How do the party insulate themselves from that? But also, what messages should they be sending out? What should they prioritize? How should they make sure that their central focus is 2026 and Barrow?
Um, I would say 2021 strategy, like focus on the issues. We know in 2021 that didn't work because people were bitter about what happened in 2016 and they acted on that. But the messaging was clear. This is wrong, and here's the alternative to it. That's what we need to focus on. People will pick their battles. Those you can talk to from being on the inside and know there are people who will call, hey, can you talk to this person? And there are people you pick up the phone and say, hey, I think this is not helpful. But at the end of the day, everybody is an adult. They have their own space. They sit in their room like I am sitting here and start typing things and saying things. But if you observe the dynamics, there is a group of people who respond to a group of people or an individual. Kind of like I say, there's, for example, I will give the example, like you have personalities, even though this is a joking thing, like Sedili and Modnau, they are constantly after each other.
Yeah.
Myself and Bombalo, we are constantly at each other. Like we have these banters going on. And you can see when people make a post or make a comment that you know exactly who they are talking to or about. And then those people, they're going to respond.
Yeah.
So all that you can do, like when people say, oh, what can you do about this? People like, if we want to focus on that, it will be a major distraction because you can, at the end of the day, not control what people say. You can condemn it. If they have positions of responsibility within your executive, you can say, we took away our responsibility from you because this is not helping our political party or our messaging or any of that stuff. But as individuals who are outside, what can you do? Stop doing this. This is not part of what UDP is. And Mr. Dow has done that constantly, not just in UDP leadership. In so many instances, even after the 2021 election, some people in the UDP were mad because somebody made a comment that was unsavory. And Mr. Dow said, essentially to the effect that I hope the police follow this up and, enforce the law. People were like, oh, he shouldn't say that because he's a UDP supporter and he's just frustrated and angry that the result didn't go the way he expected. And Mr. Dow is now throwing him under the bus. That's the kind of attitude we expect. At the end of the day, we expect people to be, exercise maturity when it comes to political discourse. But like I said, people have personal grudges that are more deep-seated than we know. And the only thing we can do is talk to the people we have cordial relations with and try to encourage them to stay away from those personal or personality politics. But you can rest assured somebody will say something that triggers another person and they will have to respond. It doesn't matter what you say to them. As long as we focus on the messaging and try to, as much as we can, as much as humanly possible, to try to rally people back and say, hey, let's focus on the messaging, just like Mr. Dabo did today. That's basically the most you can do. The people who are in positions of responsibility, I know there's usually people throwing jabs at the youngs. He's an elected mayor. What are you going to do? Chairman, you're going to take him out of his position until the next election and stuff. So when it comes to issues like that, we remind each other, hey, this is not helpful, that's not helpful. And then we focus on the message. That is what is going to help us. And we hope that the people, like I give the example from 1980s to now, PDS has been selling the same message, but people are not responding to it. Why? It's their own personal preferences. So you cannot force people to do what they want, but UDP has been doing something that is effective to keep them at the head of the game in terms of the opposition part. So we keep redoubling our effort in that and try our best and hope that people respond positively. Beyond that, it's ultimately people's decision what they want to go with.
Now that finally, I want to pick your perspective on the state of affairs of the country, President Barrow and his government, and the reality of the affairs of the country, including the economy, electricity, internet, inflation. We can go on and on and on. Although I must concede that there are certain areas that, in terms of infrastructure, then what could say that they did well at. But I think the problems that are happening right now, something as basic as electricity, it has severe social and economic implications to Gambians. So, what is your assessment of the performance of this government, and what is the urgency for Gambians to rise up and to get to the polls in December and vote to make a difference?
So, like I say, he who feels it knows it. You know, Gambians are living through economic hardship, and it's shameful that those in power think that they can fool or bamboozle the entire country. Like they go and find this insurance comparison site. It's kind of like what's it called? When you're here, you see those commercials, kayak or
Yeah,
what is the other one? Kayak.com or
I
the
know.
other bookings.com, bookings. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
it's the same thing. You have a company that is making insurance comparisons to tell you which
Mhm.
one is best to go with, telling you
Yeah.
the Gambian economy is in this status, and the Ministry of Information is running with it without doing any background check. Any like, what capacity do they have to tell us what our economy is like? That is the first thing. That same company was sued by the Philippines, I think, and they had to retract and apologize to them because they gave them a ranking that was unfair and it was not grounded in any facts. Now they found their way to the Gambia. Our ministry is running with it. Oh, our economy is good. That, even if it is a credible institution, what they look at is what is on paper. What do the people feel in their daily lives? Is your cost of living cheaper? We saw Mr. Dabo going out giving salibo to children in the streets. That obviously tells you he's not struggling financially. You know, what are you paying for groceries? Or when you go to the market, what are you able to get for yourself to feed your family? How many times is your family eating? You live in the combos. Electricity is something you rely on constantly. What is that doing to you that now is shutting everything down? And then you see the president come out and he's telling you, oh, Gambia is a third world country. So basically, we should accept that electricity, is going to come on and off. When he was the one who said, now I'm not enough capacity, we are at that point. You are feeling it, you are seeing it. The economy, it doesn't matter what it says on paper, it is just completely in the gutters. People are struggling. Everyone has turned into a beggar. Before you know that, have an event in your area and you see elders coming who would normally not bother themselves going to anybody's event. But because that when they come there, they probably going to find food. People create events out of nowhere just so they can have, Johnson to help them move on to the next, phase of whatever it is that they are going through. So people are feeling it. You live in a country where 2026 people are sinking boreholes, and the government is bragging about sinking boreholes for the people. Borehole is that's just crazy to me. There's no water treatment. There's You sink your own borehole. Basically, it's a well, and people from the village would know this. You grow up around wells, and they'll say, "Oh, Karinyo Lokolmo Dioman Diasai." Why is that? Back in the day, people don't use so many chemicals. They don't, have so much processed stuff all in the environment seeping into their water table. They can sink wells and get water from it. But now everything is toxic. It finds its way into our drinking water. So when you have your borehole, basically you're just drawing water from the ground that is probably contaminated, not treated. When they go through NAWEC, at least there's some treatment there if you get it. But people are complaining everywhere that they don't have that water. You are feeling that, you are seeing that. You go to the market, everything is more expensive than it was yesterday. Yet still, you say, take a bit of jam. Like, when are you go? And then you're disturbing other people about feeding your family when everything is pointing to the government. So my message to people is, does this guy strike you as a leader who can take us out of this misery that we are in? Everybody has that responsibility. Without telling you how to vote, let us focus on Barrow. He is the one who is in charge of our national purse. We pay our taxes to him. He takes loans in our name. He is seeking a new mandate. So ask yourself, does he strike you as a competent leader, a capable leader? Everyone owes themselves that assessment. If you decide he is not, You have no excuse, absolutely none, to vote for him. You have a host of candidates. It doesn't matter if they are divided. It doesn't go vote for somebody else and deny him. Once we deny him enough votes, he's not going to win. Whoever replaces him, we know that that's where the majority think they should put their vote in. So when public service becomes a means of self-enrichment for those in positions of serving the people, and their families are the only ones who benefit from those positions, what it foments is animosity, because you're living in a society that has two levels: people who have no problem catering to their needs and taking care of their families, and everybody else who is struggling. So the economic realities of the Gambia are such that we see those same people you live with on the same streets who were nothing, who used to come to your house and beg for a cup of rice or something. Now they're driving the most expensive cars, taking their children to schools abroad, and doing all kinds of things. Why? Because they're in public service. And no public servant's job is going to give them that access. So you see that, you get angry. This administration has no plans. They have demonstrated that time and time and time again. Let's say, for example, Senator Mankajang Sonko, when she was accused of, being corrupt from the KMC, what did he do? Took her to NBR.
Reinstated her. Yeah.
Jonga, the same thing. When he was accused of corruption, he redeployed him to somewhere else when BAC got rid of him. The same thing with that guy from Social Security. When the heat was on and they had all those problems on Social Security, he took him and put him to Banjul. When the Auditor General comes out with reports like this was mismanagement here, there was corruption here, or that's just an opinion, he has no intention of tackling this corruption because that's his entire game. And we are all seeing it. So now it is up to you as Gambians to think on that. But one thing we can tell you for free is that if you look at the trajectory of history, 1981 Kuko School, I don't know how many people died in it and how much misery was caused. It's because people felt like they have no faith in the administration in the country. They are benefiting themselves and leaving everybody else out. Everybody felt excluded. Kukoi, that people don't know, a lot of people don't know, he first tried to go into the National Assembly. When he failed, that led to his rebellion. Many people died. 1994, go and look at Sana Sabali's testimony, look at Edward's testimony. They will tell you the differences between officers, who had relatives in high places, and generally Nigerian officers who came there doing nothing other than womanizing and drinking alcohol. They get all the pay and the benefits, while Gambian officers who were doing more got nothing. They felt left out, they felt frustrated, and they felt like the only way they can effect change was through the force of arms. They took up their guns. Luckily, no blood was shed. But after 1994 to now, how many hundreds of people died? The Ghanaians alone almost numbered 100. So that is the trajectory of history. It repeats itself constantly. If people have a feeling that we cannot change this government through the ballot box, the next alternative comes. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible always invite
The battle of the gun.
chaos,
Yeah.
the battle of the gun. And that's what is going to happen. If Barrow wins another time, he has no intention. He's going to feel emboldened. He's going to feel like Gambian people approve of what he's doing. So he's going to do more of what he's doing. What that's going to lead to is more frustration, more pent up anger. And we just need a tiny little spark. And that country will be in flames. This is not a threat. It's not that anybody is planning it, but that's the trajectory of history. We all agree, like I said at the beginning, that 2 terms is enough for everybody. Barrow has done his 2 terms. Let us try somebody else. Find a candidate. Mama Kandelambang, Esafal Lambang, UDP Lambang, UMCM. It doesn't matter. Who you feel like will do a better job than Barrow, stick with him, support him. And if at the end of the day, that is the candidate who wins, we know that's where majority say your view. And if that is not the candidate who wins, the other one wins, it's like, okay, I got it wrong. Majority of people think this other guy should win. But that person should not be Barrow because it is spelling disaster for us. Barrow will feel more emboldened. And the same way Jammeh went is the same path he's going to take. That is evident from history. Don't say, oh, they're trying to scare us. It's exactly what happens always.
Honestly, I think you echo a lot of the sentiments that I have, Brother Nata. It's been absolutely wonderful talking to you. It's been very educative for me, and I hope it has been for a lot of people too. Not that I'm surprised. Obviously, you've been amazing for as long as I've known you, and I've engaged with a lot of the writings that you put out, and I enjoy reading your blog as well. But once again, I just want to take this opportunity to thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me, and I hope that we can do more of this, and I can get you to come and especially getting into December, we can have more and more conversations. My goal is also for you to help me to bring Pata here. It's a mission impossible right now, but I'm working it on the background to also make sure that the Jara boy is able to come on this show. But really, it means a lot to me that you managed to be here. So thank you so much.
You got it. I'll make sure he comes because I'm in charge of it. But thank you also. Thank you very much for expanding the conversation, creating a platform for everybody. We need these conversations, take emotion out of it, and hear
Yeah.
from every side so we can make a more informed decision. You
Yeah.
know, the more we talk, you know,
Mhm.
we talk, we get to see each other. I know I'm rambling on, but you see that famous picture where you have a number six, one person standing on one side, the other standing on the other side. It's a six, it's a nine, it's a six, it's a nine.
Yeah.
It's different perspectives. We're looking at the same thing, but either because of our experiences, our cultural values, our worldviews, we're looking at the same thing and interpreting it differently. If we don't have a conversation that is engaging, that is civil, we are not going to see things from each other's perspectives. And
Yeah.
once we see it from each other's perspectives, we can chart a way forward and know that we all have the same goal, which is a better Gambia, where we all live in dignity and our children are not burdened with, you know, billions and billions of dollars in debt. So thank you for expanding that conversation, for creating that platform. And anytime you feel like it, just reach out and absolutely by halftime I will join. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, brother. Once again, thank you all of you to our audience too in the comments. Coach Pasamba and the Tukulor, everybody who are in the comments enjoying the conversation, and so all of you, thank you for being here. Thank you for all of your contributions. It means a lot to us. While you're at it, please also consider subscribing to our YouTube Dialectic Space podcast, and also have that notification on. That way, you're supporting what we're doing here as well. Once again, you all have a beautiful. I guess it's Sunday in Gambia, but yeah, have a wonderful night, and we look forward to seeing you